Hail and well-met slayers of giants. Welcome to Chapter 13 of my serial novel, Tilting at Windmills. Remember, this is a draft. There are lots of changes I'll be making to the final manuscript based on the feedback from readers who've posted in the comments on Substack and Patreon. If you notice anything, from the smallest typo to the largest structural change, I will be very grateful for your notes. So become a patron of my Patreon or subscribe to my Substack, and you'll get a little reminder each week when a new chapter comes out. And if you know someone who might enjoy the show, tell them to go back and catch up with you. Here's Tilting at Windmills, Chapter 13. Two roads diverged in Nebraska. Two roads diverged in Nebraska, and who can say which is the less traveled by? Do more people pass through the state from the east to the west or from the south to the north? As an omniscient narrator, I know the answer, of course, but for the sake of our story, let's say they are roughly equivalent and neither so trafficked as to be congested, in a way which inconveniences our characters. Benjamin and Chris continued across the state, then through a bit of Utah, and into Idaho before their last hotel stay on their journey. Meanwhile, Rolando de Santa Maria del Pi of Barcelona, Sir Sanchez of the town of Eels, guardian of justice, and Lady Callie the Lionhearted of San Leon, made a hasty exit from Nebraska to distance themselves from the jurisdiction of some corrupt police, and quickly reached their destination of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Back in Chicago, after a failed attempt to ingratiate himself to a group of magical aunties, Rolando, figurative hat in hand, had interviewed a few about the disappearance of an Anhana named Rihanna. The Lady of the Great Lake, Ariel Honan, had told Rolando and Serge about Rihanna's disappearance, and the aunties confirmed it but couldn't provide any clues about her abductors. The next Anhana to disappear from Ariel Honan's radar was Joanna, who'd been stationed in Sioux Falls, where the Floyd River meets the Missouri. Anhanas prefer small pools of water in forests rather than rivers, and generally like to stay away from people, though they offer magical blessings to the rare people who can find them. But the Lady of the Great Lake had sent these Anhanas out on a specific mission, to discover the source of the curse on the country, so they needed to be in places where they could collect information on the human population and relay that upriver and downriver to create a network that would reach the water goddess living in Lake Erie. And since Rolando and Serge were on the same quest, figuring out why the Anhanas were missing was their best means to find clues. Rolando didn't have any magical connections in Sioux Falls, and had planned to skip straight to the next missing Anhana, named Lana, whose last known whereabouts were in Ontario, Oregon, where the Snake meets the Payette. But the accidental discovery of Callie, the hitchhiker who'd run afoul of some local PD who were taking advantage of local sex workers to create their own private prostitution franchise corporation, meant they needed to change their itinerary. This detour separated them from Chris and Benjamin, the author who'd lost a measure of his sanity in a failed attempt to escape the United States, and had spawned Rolando to try to understand the insanity of the country to which he was returning. The writer and his fictional character would eventually reconnect, though not where, when, or how one might expect. Once Rolando, Serge, and Callie crossed into South Dakota, they turned parallel to the border, following the Missouri River, looking for the spot where it intersected with the Floyd. This turned out to be trickier than they expected, since there were no small roads or parking places along the shores of the Missouri, just Interstate 29 on one side, the river on the other, and some undeveloped land in between. Serge went past the spot where the two rivers met, crossing the bridge over the Floyd, then went down to the nearest exit, flipped around, passed the bridge again, because now they were on the wrong side of the freeway, pulled another U-turn at the next exit, and eventually pulled off just beyond the bridge. Callie found all of this confounding and disquieting. She knew they were looking for a missing girl, and now these two men who'd picked her up were pulling off the side of the road by a bridge and some bushes and a couple rivers. She didn't want to find a dead body, and she was even less inclined to become one. I think I'll wait in the car, if that's okay with you guys.
Yes, this is probably for the best, Rolando said. It's still quite cold, and Sir Sanchez will leave the engine running, though we will try to be brief.
This made her feel much better. She figured if they planned to murder her and dump her body in the river, they probably wouldn't leave the keys to the car while they went off to sharpen their machetes. Serge went around to the back, opened the hatch, and pulled out a broadsword. That didn't help Callie's confidence. Then the two men wandered down toward the water's edge. The low bushes and rocks were not tall enough to hide them, and she kept an eye on their heads and shoulders as they descended below her while she idly massaged the ridged handle of the pocket knife in her jeans. At the water's edge, Rolando held up his cane like a microphone and spoke some magic words to the skull of Poe. As usual, the spell made the skull glow brightly for a moment, then dull, and Serge scanned the surface of the river for a sign of the incantation's effect. At first, nothing. Then he saw a faint trace of lines of light, making curving loops through the space where the two rivers joined. The knights wandered along the shore to the west toward the bridge under the freeway. As they neared it, they saw the lines didn't cross underneath. Instead, they led to a spot on the muddy banks. And there were tracks there in the soil. The footprints weren't the perfect imprints Serge expected from movies. The ground was speckled with stones of various sizes, tufts of grass, and random human trash, which also obscured them.
"This is bad,"
Rolando said. He pointed to a particular track, clearly that of some hooved animal, but Serge couldn't identify it. The two paired imprints were larger than a deer's. A bison? A moose?
"Notice the frequency and the depth. This creature did not weigh as much as a bison, but it pressed its hooves this deep into the earth because it was standing on only 2 legs.
Like a minotaur?
A good guess, Sir Sanchez, but I do not think so. Minotaurs prefer to remain underground in systems of caves. If one were on the surface, I would expect to see the marking of dragged chains. They have occasionally been captured and brought to the surface to serve as fighters, but they are extremely difficult to control. All rage. They quickly turn on the person holding the chains. No, these are somewhat similar creatures."
"These? Plural?"
"Yes, I count the tracks of 4 of them. See?"
The older knight pointed at various indentations, which meant little to Serge.
"These, I believe, belong to Junan, swinemen. They are like minotaurs, but with the heads of pigs, or wild boars, or something in between, hairy, tusks. They are more intelligent than minotaurs, and their services can be purchased because they are gluttons. Food, sex, basically their best characteristic is their laziness. They require constant reminders that they will be paid in food or sex or money to purchase said, or they just flop down and wait for someone to kick them and spur them to action. Vicious fighters when they get going, especially when they feel cornered and frightened, but always target their boss, because they might flee to a place where they can eat a large meal and take a nap."
Serge nodded along, taking this in, trying not to remind himself that it sounded like madness. If he thought about it too much, he'd remember the giant, the djinn, and ultimately the plains whites, and he did not want to think about them ever again. "So we need to look for whoever was controlling them."
"Precisely,"
Rolando said. For a man of his advanced years, he sprang from a crouch with ease, scanned the ground, and crouched down again quickly.
"Ah, here. Perhaps. It's not easy to tell. Did a human come before them and leave these tracks, or just after? But if we can find a human footprint that is smudging the Junan prints, then one pierced by a Junan track, we know they were here simultaneously. Here, and here. Yes, I am fairly certain we have found the employer of the Junan."
"Human?"
"Well, someone wearing tennis shoes with this symbol. Do you recognize it?"
Serge examined the mark. It wasn't perfect, but he crouched low and read it from inches away. A letter N and a letter B squished into a single rectangle and tilted slightly, like they were italicized. At first, Serge thought the N was less distinct, like it hadn't been pressed into the mud with as much force, but when he examined it closely, he saw it was decorated with 4 long triangular cuts, which made it look like it was faded on one side and zooming into solidity on the other. "Ah, I think I know this one." He grabbed his phone and typed 3 words into the Google search bar. New Balance. They've been trying to make a push into the NBA sneakerhead crowd, but they have a reputation for being an old guy's shoe because apparently they're really comfortable. So,
"A boomer shoe," Rolando said. "Makes sense. Learning the kind of magic necessary."
His voice trailed off. Serge gave him a moment. "What are you thinking?"
"My guess? A warlock lured the Anhana to the shore."
"Joanna."
"Yes, Joanna. She came to the shore here."
He moved to the spot and did a slow turn, examining the tracks.
"The warlock must have trapped her in some way to prevent her from returning to the river. But she was still able to fight, so he had the Junan surround her and take a beating from her magic until she was exhausted. Then he took her away."
"Where?"
"Let's see how far we can follow the tracks."
Rolando led Serge away from the river. On the side of the freeway, the muddy soil was replaced by gravel and broken chunks of asphalt.
"They either crossed the road or got into an auto."
He studied the gravel on the side of the road.
"Ah, this may be helpful. Assuming they came to this spot, it would be an unlikely coincidence that some other vehicle was parked in this same place, no? And do you see this track? Their vehicle was one of those large trucks which have 6 tires, 2 in the front and 4 on the back axle."
"People call them dualies," Serge said. "Dual rear wheel. Used for towing heavy loads."
"Like 4 large Junan in the bed."
He lowered his voice as though they might hear him.
"Junan do not smell good. I would not want them in the cab with me either." Serge looked out across the freeway, taking in the sparse traffic, the skyline of Sioux City to his left, the flat horizon to his right.
So we learned a little, but how are we going to find a dually with 4 swinemen in the back who passed through here at some indeterminate time in the past?
Months ago, I think. These tracks were preserved by the ice, but they were made when there was no ice. So, late fall?
So, they could be anywhere by now?
Rolando nodded slowly. I do not mean to hurt your feelings, Sir Sanchez, but this is a good thing. We need time as well. You are not prepared to fight 4 Junan, let alone a warlock who can control them.
Ah, no magical training montage where I learn to be a full knight-errant in 5 minutes?
Rolando smiled and shook his head. I am sorry, my friend. It will take a bit longer than this.
They walked back to the SUV, crunching gravel dislodged from the latest of the storm's ice under their boots. When they climbed in, Callie feigned nonchalance. Find what you were looking for?
Clues only, Rolando said. Our missing person remains missing, but we now know the brand of tennis shoes worn by her abductor.
New Balance, Serge supplied, so probably a boomer, they said in unison.
Warlock, Rolando said.
What? Callie asked.
Yes, a man in late middle age is most likely, Rolando tried.
But you said... It's complicated, Serge said.
Perhaps we can show you something that will help explain this situation in which we find ourselves, Rolando said.
Serge thought of the Plains Whites. No, I don't think that's a good idea. Callie, the eager fledgling reporter, leaned forwards. I'm game.
Let us continue on our journey, and I will keep an eye out for a suitable example.
Rolando looked at Serge and stressed suitable dramatically. Fine. Serge took them to the next exit and performed the same UE again, then headed back to the west. The trio drove through the day, and Rolando didn't spot anything which might serve his purposes. By sunset, they'd made their obligatory stop at Wall Drug, then turned southward at Rapid City and were outside Argyle when Rolando directed Serge to pull over.
There, he pointed. Do you see them?
Callie looked through the tinted backside window and saw nothing but a small clearing in the otherwise pine-covered lowlands at the edge of the Black Hills National Forest. Then, as she watched, small lights glinted. Fireflies, she asked.
Perhaps, Rolando said, his voice full of winking. Let us go examine them.
Serge found a safe enough place to park, and the three walked off the road into the field. Tall grasses, dried and killed by the winter, held on as hollow corpses of vegetation. Floating amidst these, 2 or 3 feet above the ground, small glowing lights revealed themselves in shadows, then vanished when competing with the last rays of the sun.
Do you see them?
Rolando asked Callie. Fireflies. They aren't, though, Serge said. It's January, and they're too low to the ground. He looked at Rolando. What are they really?
Devas, also known as flower fairies, but
that's confusing, because they aren't fairies, Serge said.
Correct. Devas tend to the flowers. At this time of year, they are planting or nurturing the early growth of the plants which will produce the flowers.
So they're pollinating insects like bees, Callie said? I've never heard of them.
Look at them more closely, Lady Callie, the lion-hearted of San Leon.
Serge could see the Devas looked nothing like lightning bugs. For one thing, they weren't all yellow. Some cast blue light, others pink, others orange, others soft mauves that were hard to see in the waning light. He focused on a particular Deva, one of the purple ones, and crouched down near it. The creature had wings like an insect, but the body was very similar to a human's, only entirely composed of some glowing substance, like a crystal sculpture channeling light or a clear plastic container filled with fluorescent liquid. He struggled to make out the details because the creature was so small, less than an inch in length when flying, in height when standing. Which is what the Deva did, hovering just in front of Serge until he took the hint and extended a hand. He nearly lost his balance from his crouched position and had to tripod with his other, slapping it on the cold, wet earth and attracting Callie's attention. Callie watched as Serge offered his index finger to the hovering, glowing Deva. She took a step closer, then hesitated, worried about scaring it off. She watched from 6 feet away, still within earshot, and was surprised to hear him speak to the creature she believed to be an insect. "Hello there," he said. His voice carried awe, and also the kind of cutesiness he normally reserved for puppies. "Hello," the Deva replied. Her voice was feminine, strong, and as loud as anyone 150 times her height. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you could speak." "I didn't know you could either," the Deva said. "But now we both know." Serge couldn't make out her facial expression because her glow, faint as it was, overwhelmed such details, but he could hear the smile in her voice. He returned the inflection. Fair. I've never met a Deva. I'm Serge, human, a knight-errant, in training. At your service, milady. He looked over at Callie. She smiled. He waited. She waited. And he realized she couldn't see or hear the Deva. I've never met a human, the Deva said, let alone a knight-errant in training, Serge. Is that your formal title? No, it's a little corny. I'm Sir Sanchez of the town of Eels, guardian of justice. It's too much, too big for me. You'll grow into it. He chuckled. That's kind of you to say. And my friend here is Lady Callie, the Lion-Hearted of San Leon. I think she has already grown into her title. He looked at Callie again, wondering what she was making of all this. She looked amused and slightly confused. I don't think she can, hear us. He felt painfully foolish. She can. She chooses not to. And I choose not to take that personally. I have not met any humans, but I understand some of you find us too frightening to see. We are pretty awesome. My name is Cicely Mary Pulsatia Pattens. The Pulsatia Pattens, also known as the Pasque flower, is my business, so I grow into my name every year. Give yourself time, Sir Sanchez. And give her time. Maybe she will grow into seeing what's right in front of her nose. Speaking of business, I have more garden to tend, but consider returning in the spring to see my work. I think if we don't get another cold snap like the last one, it should be best in early April. Yes, I'll see if I can, he said, as she floated off. Thank you, he called after her. He turned to Callie. So you saw... Yeah, it landed on your finger. A bug. Yep, and you talked to it and told it our names. She started to turn back to the car, inviting him to join her with the angle of her shoulders. Very formal. She turned away completely, then looked back. Very cute, but very formal. He followed behind her. I like to be polite. He searched and saw Rolando standing 20 feet away. He waved him over and motioned to the car. Rolando pointed at Callie and made a question mark with his shoulders. Serge shook his head, then waved his hand in front of his own face, back and forth like a backup dancer for Lady Gaga, seeing his mentor through his splayed fingers. Rolando looked down and shrugged acquiescence as he started back to the SUV. As Callie walked around toward the driver's side back door, Serge leaned toward Rolando. The Deva I met had never met a human before, so no clues there. Did any of them tell you anything about the curse? The warlock with the pig guys? No, only that I should come back in April when their flowers are blooming. I got that invite too. Perhaps we should. It might be good for our perspective. How do you mean? Our work is our quest, to discover the curse upon your country and cure it. Let's say we are successful. Their work is to grow a bunch of little purple flowers in a field. Whose work is more important? Well, ours, right? Is it? The Devas would disagree. And the Pasque flowers. Who is to say? Perhaps we should come back in April and decide which population matters more, Americans or Pasque flowers. Serge frowned hard. Isn't it important that we believe our quest is the most important thing in the world? Quite the opposite. An important part of the code of chivalry is understanding that we are obligated to be honorable people, not to leave our honor behind while chasing the tasks which seem most sexy at the time. This is a difficult balance because of course we want to do work which will bring glory to the ladies to whom we have pledged ourselves. But even in this, we should attempt to maintain a healthy perspective. I do not want to conquer the world in the name of the Lady Nuria of Barcelona, though such a thing would bring a great deal of attention to her, since attention alone can be gained dishonorably. He pointed back to the field. Perhaps I could have pledged to plant 1,000,000 flowers in the name of the Lady Nuria of Barcelona, and that would have been a greater quest. I do not know. But I have chosen to discover the source of the curse, and I shall do it or die trying, just as I would plant 1,000,000 flowers or die in the attempt. As you Americans say, it is important not to get our horses too high. To get on our high horses, Serge corrected automatically. Then he thought about Rolando's alternate quest, the one which could have been. That's kind of beautiful, Rolando. High horses or high horses? No, I mean the idea of a quest to plant 1,000,000 flowers, or something similarly, I don't know, pure? Yes, this purity is the kind of honor I wish for, and the kind of honor I wish to teach you. Far away, in southern Idaho, Benjamin lay next to Chris. He stared at the ceiling while she slept. He loved the mixture of snores and hums and clicks she made as she slept, a symphony of strange noises some talented DJ could sample into a banger of a techno song. Benjamin felt the swell of love in his chest, inside the base of his sternum, just beneath his heart, a contentment which wanted more room than he could offer it. But the air in the room pressed in on him, American air, cursed air. He wondered why he couldn't feel safe and satisfied with nothing more than his love for Chris, for his son and stepkid back in Oregon, his parents and nieces and nephew in Ohio, his nibbling in Pennsylvania, his sister and God's knew where. Unemployed and worse than broke, he considered his next move in this context. Why not get a job delivering pizza as he had had in college, or apply the skills he'd learned as an undergrad philosophy major to bartending? He'd never be a great bartender, he knew. He didn't have the memory for it. He'd always be flipping through a little book or looking up recipes on his phone. But he didn't like to drink very much and also wasn't averse to alcohol, a temperamental balance he thought a bar owner might value. And he loved talking to strangers. He also liked to sing, and was, this narrator can tell you, almost as good at it as he believed. He knew he'd never be a much better singer than a bartender, but he wondered if he could find a job slinging drinks at a place which would also allow him to host a weekly karaoke night. And he could focus his attention on simply being happy to be with Chris. And his dogs. He missed his dogs. Yet his mind pinwheeled through ideas for novels, lines for poems, the next big marketing push for a small press. He chided himself. Why did he need to write the next novel, amalgamate and publish the next collection of poetry? As pathways to wealth and fame, these were among the most ridiculous, perhaps slightly below competitive eating and slightly above juggling. Don't believe me? Quick, name 5 rich and famous poets. Okay, stop laughing. It's not that funny. Poets, stop crying. You knew what you were getting into. Benjamin wondered what hole in his soul he expected to fill with recognition for his words, and if all his political activism had only led him to the conclusion that the most moral thing he could do was flee the country and speak out from a place where he wasn't supporting the current regime in any way, only to fail and have to return to fill their coffers with his taxes and their legitimacy with his presence. Were all his attempts to call attention to oppression really just self-righteousness stuffed into that same empty cavern system wending its way through his psyche? Chris opened and closed her mouth repeatedly, in an amusing fish-out-of-water expression, reminding him of the time she'd asked him if she should get tested for sleep apnea, and he'd surprised her with the volume and high pitch of his "yes." Then she smiled in her sleep, perhaps dreaming fondly of the memory of the way she'd laughed at him, and decided not to make the appointment. She rolled over and pressed her forehead into the side of his neck, her jaw against his clavicle, and hummed. And again he wondered why anyone would possibly have the audacity to ask for more than this. The Devas did not know the answer to his question, because they didn't have time to ask. They had flowers to tend to. Sometime in late March, or perhaps in April, or maybe in mid-May, the flowers would bloom in a field that wasn't too shrouded by the shadows of the pines or the jagged peaks of the Black Hills mountain range. And on days where there were no clouds, or cloud-like herds of plains whites, the rays of the sun would light up the field, calling the purple petals to open and aim the iridescent yellow stamens to the sky. Together with the ultraviolet petals, they would create a color no human could possibly describe or even properly appreciate. The Devas would see this and celebrate their work, and it was enough. If you're excited about this project, please subscribe on YouTube or like and share on TikTok or Reels or whatever app you're on now. And if you're willing to support me as I craft this novel in serial form, please consider supporting my Substack or Patreon. Each week I'll give a shout out to some of those patrons. This week I'm thanking Patreon patrons Ryan Walston, who's been my friend for 30 years now because we're old, Ginger Smith, who's been my friend for even longer because she was friends with my parents first, and Brian U. Garrison, who was a guest on this show way back on episode 93 of Writers Not Writing, and then we ran into one another at a party recently, so that was very cool. Brian U. Garrison is the author of The Future is Anti-Fascist and Micropoetry for Microplanets, both available through his website, linked in the show notes. Thank you all for your support of the Patreon. If any of you listeners are creators and have something to plug, please email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com. See you back here next week for Chapter 14 of Tilting at Windmills. Teaser: Rolando, Serge, and Callie will confront a djinn in Utah. and it will not go as they expect.